People who have had a near-death experience and what they described can be vastly different from each other, and there appears to be no set rules on what to expect when you actually have one. The following story is a case in point where an Australian man had an NDE that was very unusual, but he swears it was not a dream, but a genuine NDE. In 1981, Bill John from New South Wales, Australia, had an out-of-body experience after a serious heart attack, which he was fortunate enough to recover from, but what he experienced stayed fresh in his memory for many years, where he remembered every little detail. At the time of the incident, Bill was about 60 years old and had been suffering chest pains, which he initially ignored. But when the pain persisted, he called the ambulance, and within half an hour, he found himself in an emergency ward on a medical table and given an electrocardiogram. At this stage, he had been given no drugs or any form of painkiller at all, so his mind remained clear and lucid. As he was laying on the table, all of a sudden the acoustic tiles in the ceiling started to waver as if they were floating on water. It was at this stage that Bill believed the end was close, but said he was not really afraid, but strangely curious, as he felt he was about to transition from his existing life to another. He then found himself in a plain pastel-coloured square room, about 3.5 metres high, with sides about 8 metres long. He sensed there was another wall about 1 metre behind him, and could not tell whether the wall ahead of him was solid or a space that stretched into infinity, that consisted of what looked to be vertical drapes. Each drape was about 1 metre wide, and was stretched tightly from floor to ceiling, and vibrated as if an electric fan was blowing on it. Each drape was about 1 metre apart, and behind them was another series of drapes. All of the drapes were light pink at the top, but the colour slowly became a darker pink as they reached the bottom. The lighting was fairly even, and not too intensive, but he could not see where the source of the light was coming from. But it was what came next that took Bill by surprise, when he saw people, but only their heads and shoulders. The people were in 2s and 3s, and were all peering at him from behind the drapes. These were not just people visiting the ward in the strange hospital environment, they were all familiar faces, and to his utter amazement, he saw his deceased mother in the centre of one of the groups of people, along with many friends and childhood acquaintances. All of the people he had known and loved during the childhood, but what was the most striking was the expression on their faces that showed extreme happiness, interest, excitement, joy, and expectation. He could see that they were totally overjoyed at his arrival. Words could not express the magnitude of their feelings at his arrival, and Bill felt fulfilled. At this stage, all Bill wanted to do was go to his mother, but he was unable to do so as something was stopping him. Suddenly, 3 figures who appeared to be men of average height, wearing what looked to be business suits, materialised from what appeared to be a mass of shimmering snowflakes. The men then rapidly increased in size and density, and then became solid, and they stood in line, close together at right angles to him and on his left-hand side. Then all of a sudden, 6 isolated events in his life came to him, but they appeared as mental images, in full colour and 3-dimensional, as he had experienced in real life. Each image finished with the decision that he had made, the action he had taken, and the effect that each had had on the later lives of the people concerned. Bill was impressed at what he was seeing, but at the same time frightened. He even said that he felt a bit smug at how his intentions had worked out for the people. More changes took place where the 3 men on his left then disappeared from whence they came. Then he was surrounded by a shimmering light, and he could see his legs. He again tried to walk to his mother, but again something was stopping him. At this stage, he was not thinking about himself and was unaware of how he was dressed, but he was thinking, well, here I am, but what about his wife Gwyneth? She's still alive. He had no sooner thought about his wife when his thoughts were brought to a sudden and painful stop that felt like a blow to the back of his head. It felt as if someone had hit him with a baseball bat. After the serene and pleasant experience he had just been through, he was now angry and upset and hoped that he might be able to return to the world he had just left. He then tried a 3rd time to reach his mother, but then another blow, as painful as the first, struck him, where he shouted, "Don't!" When the ceiling in the emergency room appeared over his head, he knew he was back. He said the disappointment he then felt was indescribable, and he now felt shattered and resentful. He'd not wanted to come back. He looked up and saw the medical team staring down at him. They asked him whether he remembered what he had shouted out, and if so, what did he say? Bill then repeated the words, "No" and "don't." He assumed that what he had said was normal, and there had probably been many other people angry about being brought back from somewhere as beautiful as where he had just been. Bill was discharged from the hospital 10 days later, and now had a different attitude on life. He realised that it was not yet his time, but after he was told that he needed a triple bypass, he decided to ignore their advice. He no longer had a fear of dying, but was disappointed when his family and friends refused to listen to his amazing story, and they said they didn't want to hear about it. He could not understand why anyone would not want to know the details of an experience such as his, with the promise of an afterlife.